from Spectator TV. I'm James Heale, and I'm joined today by the Spectator's Katy and former Labour advisor John McTernan. Now today, Keir Starmer has been reshuffling his top team on the Labour front bench. Katy, what are the main takeaways from today?
So I think, as was broadly expected, the 5 missions, so ultimately not as catchy as the 5 priorities, but the 5 missions for a Labour government that Keir Starmer set up, the shadow cabinet members who have briefs that correspond with that have not been moved. So despite some excited talk a few months ago of Ed Miliband could be in trouble, is Keir Starmer after Uxbridge, even though there's a separate issue, of course, to some of these net zero energy goals, going to, change the brief that Ed Miliband has? That has not happened. And instead, probably the most, headline change is Angela Rayner, who has gone from having multiple job titles. If you think back to 2021, where there was a Labour reshuffle that went very wrong for Keir Starmer, because he stripped Angela Rayner of her chairman role. And then all of a sudden, the whole thing was held up because Angela Rayner and her team were not happy with many of the other things that were being suggested. And eventually she negotiated it so she had multiple briefs, and it was seen as a sign of her strength and Keir Starmer's weakness. I think today, actually, the reshuffle has been pretty seamless, and you have a situation where Angela Rayner has changed roles, but it's gone well for both sides. So she is now taking on the role that Lisa Nandy had, which is Levelling Up and Housing Secretary. And she also is no longer just described as Deputy Labour Leader, which, of course, is a role that Keir Starmer cannot take away from her because it was picked by Labour members when he was picked as Labour Leader. She's also Shadow Deputy Prime Minister. So it's just confirmation that she would be Deputy Prime Minister in a Labour government. It's something she's spoken about publicly before, saying, Keir Starmer's in trouble if he doesn't give me that, joking about it, saying, she's his John Prescott. But it does just show, I think, that they, despite talks of friction, there's an effort to say this person is staying close, they have a role in these. And therefore, Lisa Nandy demoted, quite a few demotions, but I think another theme which John has picked up on is actually the rise of the Blairites, and actually there are quite a few candidates, such as promotion for Pat McFadden, which suggests the right of the party is in the ascendancy.
John, you did probably my favourite tweet of the day, pointing out that no less than 5 SPADs, special advisors from Tony Blair's era, are now in the shadow cabinet. Who are they, and what do they now represent in terms of their promotions?
I actually miscalculated. There's 6 of them, because there's Ed Miliband, there's Pat McFadden, there's Liz Kendall, there's Hilary Benn, there's Johnny Ashworth, and who's my 6th one? Peter Kyle. Peter Kyle. So we've got half a dozen new Labour shadow cabinet members, and 3 actually shadow cabinet members who were in the cabinet with Brown and Blair. So what you've got is, for me, you've got the ultimate settling of the soft left and the Blairites, and they're going to run the party and I hope run the country. And it's that partly is experience, partly is ideology. It was, Liz Kendall was beaten in the Labour leadership election, but she framed the terms of the debate under which Keir Starmer has won back the Labour Party when she said, in that debate, that famous thing, she said, country first, party second. She got punished by the Labour Party membership for being so patriotic, but she laid the basis for the claim of progressive patriotism, and I think that's been rewarded now. Her talent in the ministerial team, her work on social care. She's finally got to the top in department work and benches, where she and I both worked together for Harriet Harman back in the beginning of the Blair government, 97, 98. So I see experience coming back. I see the wisdom of keeping Ed Miliband in the shadow cabinet, a really important figure to reach to the left of the party, to reach to younger voters, to reach to greener voters, and the importance of actually Angie Rayner deciding, it is time for a real job. It's time for a job that's about housing, about planning, about regional inequality, about the future plans for devolution, how we'll actually devolve powers to mayors, how we'll devolve powers to local government. So there's something big about what Angie's done, because it shows her confidence, but it also shows Keir is in charge. This is Keir Starmer's first cabinet where he's not had to worry about the balance. He's promoted talent, demoted people for poor performance, moved people out the shadow cabinet completely, in the case of Rosanna, and I think it is the way it moves so quickly and so slickly is a tribute to the hand behind the scenes of Sue Gray, whose first day as Chief of Staff this is, but I suspect that's first formal working day. I doubt it's the first day she'd been working with Keir, because it's all gone really well. And on the other side of politics, the wheels keep falling off or the roofs keep falling in. I'm not sure what metaphor we should be using.
Well, sticking to Labour, Katy, John there mentioned about the Blair-era ministers, cabinet ministers. One surprise pick from today was Hilary Benn coming back, a bit of a Labour veteran. 7 years ago was sacked after the EU referendum by Jeremy Corbyn and the subsequent leadership dilemma. That was quite an interesting role, but perhaps, a sensible one as well.
Yeah, and he's in the Northern Ireland brief, which of course is very important when you think of the Windsor framework, but future relations. Keir Starmer's always been quite clear, I think, on that, I think alignment and ultimately having a pragmatic way to avoid checks is what they would want to do. He likes to contrast himself as different to the ideological Brexiteers. So when Rishi Sunak came up with the Windsor framework, he was saying, you can have the votes. We'll help you get the votes over if you have these people who will not compromise. And even though at the time it wasn't clear there would be a vote on it, they managed to use that position. And I think Hilary Benn is someone who's seen as also quite good at compromise. If you think about during the Brexit era, when there were multiple Brexit wars, he was one of those people almost in the middle of the Labour Party, right, in terms of trying to come up with compromises on it. So I think that's telling. I think another thing that's quite striking from this reshuffle is, as John says, Blairites, soft left. What about loyalty to Keir Starmer? Because if you think about Jim McTernan, he's someone who has resigned citing some personal issues coming back from an illness, but someone who was also, I think, heavily briefed as someone who was, seen as not performing as some in the leader's office would like. In his environment brief, they really want to go on the attack on sewage. Steve Reid has been put in there in his place. Now, Steve Reid is close to Morgan McSweeney, who's a key strategist for Keir Starmer, but also I think Steve Reid, we've seen from the Labour attack ads in the spring, was someone who was quite happy to get his hands dirty and come out and say Lee's adverts are completely fine, people, and make that argument. And therefore, I think in a brief where they really want to go on their attack on the Tories, you can see that appointment. Then also, you then look at Nick Thomas-Symonds, who has been demoted, ultimately someone who has been pretty loyal to Keir Starmer when you divide up the shadow cabinet, but yet has really had quite a fall from grace if you think about when Keir Starmer first made up his shadow cabinet. This person was shadow home secretary and has slowly seen their roles reduced further. Now it's a cabinet office role, shadow role. And therefore it feels as though loyalty alone and having backed Keir Starmer is not enough to keep you a plush job. I think there is, depending on who you speak to, and caveats and denials coming, I'm sure, but there are some who say, he spends too much writing a book, not enough time on the role, and that puts some nose out joint previously. Of course, a book isn't really a blocker to everything, because Wes Streeting has a book out and it's been lots of promotion and is still sitting pretty, of course, in Shadow Health.
Yeah, John, Katy makes a great point there, talking about how differing the fortunes are in Keir Starmer's first shadow cabinet, and a lot of the people who are now getting top jobs in the shadow cabinet were junior spokesmen back then, people like Peter Kyle, Wes Streeting, etc. What do you think of Keir Starmer's own journey over the past few years? You see a lot of those kind of soft left people around him have now sort of been phased out, and it's much more a focus on, as Katy says, competence as well as loyalty.
Look, I think Keir's had an amazing journey if you think about it. He understood he had to run to the left to win the party leadership, because the Labour Party could have died if it made the wrong choice for leader. So he saved the Labour Party by standing, running and winning. He then was elected in the middle of a pandemic, so there's no chance. We always say in politics, you only get one chance to make a first impression. Keir had no chance to get out around the country. People are only now getting a sense of who he's like, what his character is like. And I think you then get hit, not just with the pandemic and the economic consequences, but the war in Ukraine and the inflation and the cost of living. The massive change in circumstances over the last couple of years have changed the political terrain. And I think in that, he's kind of found himself. I've always thought of Keir as being a left-wing version of John Smith. John was from the right of the party, the Labour Party, from the GMB, had very traditional right-wing politics for the party, but had stolidity, had respectability, had trust baked into him, like the bank manager impression. I think Keir's got the same thing. He's from the left of the party, but he's got that kind of reassuring, I'm a lawyer. I'm not just a lawyer. I'm a prosecutor. I put bad people away. I back police services, but when the police do it wrong, I can reorganize them, change their culture, change their structure. That kind of the competence, the a man with a plan. That's what Keir comes across as, and I think he's found his plan. He's had a rocky road. If the Batley Spen by-election had gone a different way, there may well have been a full-blown leadership challenge. But where he is now, he's in the strongest position he's ever been as opposition leader. The only time he'll be stronger than this is on the first day after general election, if the Labour Party wins. Then he'll have a full power to put people into the place he wants them to be. So I think the journey's been interesting. He's adjusted to an incredible series of crises in such a short period of time, and he's taken the Labour Party to a steady 20-24 point lead in the polls. As Tony Blair said, when Tony was leader, he took over after John Smith's hard work, after Neil Kinnock's hard work, and he said to Keir, and when you took over, you had the opposite of help, the opposite of work to build on, and so it's one of the most stunning transformations in British politics, having done in just 4 years what it took Labour nearly 4 terms to do last time around.
And John, you're a long-time Labour watcher. We've discussed a lot of the big names here today, people well known in kind of Westminster circles. We're led to believe that Keir Starmer will be reshuffling some of the more junior posts this afternoon, maybe, or tomorrow. Just wondered, any names you think we should keep an eye out for coming up, likely to be put on the first rungs or maybe the second rung of the shadow ministerial ladder?
The person who I'd most like to see in the shadow cabinet is Alison McGovern, who I think is the next one on the rank to come into politics. I think you have to look at who's doing an effective job at prosecuting a case that's important to Labour. So Matt Pennycook, I hope he stays in housing. He's an expert in housing. He's behind the scenes guy. He's respected by the building industry. That's one of the things you need to do, is actually not move the juniors around. And one thing I always say about reshuffles is, in opposition, there's only one game in town, that's shadow cabinet member. In government, the Minister of State, the second in command, is one of the most influential people in government, in politics. You take the legislation through. You help sort out the department. Careers are made by being a really good Minister of State, and it's those kind. I'd like to see Helen Hayes kept in her post in education. And I think, if I'd had one tip to move up to shadow chief secretary, I'd love to see James Murray, and more of James Murray. I think he's a real talent, and he's done really, really well in that. But there's actually an incredible breadth of talent. I could just simply talk about women in the junior ranks who are really, really good, like Seema Malhotra. There's a number of people who I think, when you see the full teams, when they are a government, when they have to do press conferences, do questions, be in the House, you'll see more of the range that we've got. At the moment, the shadow cabinet is a very narrow door. However inflated it is to make a political cabinet as well, he's still a small proportion of the people who are coming through.
And finally, Katy, we couldn't do this discussion without talking about Gillian Keegan and the Education Secretary's comments today and subsequent retraction for suggestions perhaps about her work ethic.
Yeah, she's had a day. Ultimately, the bubbly cement and the questions about what's going to happen in lots of these school buildings are still dominating the return of Parliament, and I think it's just a bit of a nightmare for Rishi Sunak and his party, as it speaks to all these things, just lots of blame game about why it wasn't done sooner and so fast. You have Rishi Sunak saying, that this is not his fault when people say it's down to his spending decisions, but really, the focus now is the fact that Gillian Keegan was caught on the hot mic and, saying, why don't, with some swear words thrown in, why don't, people are noticing me doing good things? We're the only people to get off, enter a word, to do something about this. And she's since gone out and given another media appearance to clear up the comments and apologise for the language. But it's ended with her almost saying, the interview saying, well, you did seem very annoyed. Why? And eventually coming back on the journalist, which I think will divide opinion yet again, to put it mildly. I was
going to say the big lesson in politics is, I always say to politicians, when you're saying on the media to the voters, you really don't understand how hard it is to be in government. The voters listen to it and they go, do you know what? we've got an idea about what to do with ministers who think it's too hard to be in government. How about some time on the opposition benches? And I think that's the problem, is the frustrated tone. Rishi had it this morning, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak had it this morning, Gillian Keegan had it this morning, this afternoon her non-apology apology. I just think if they feel tired and scratchy and not willing to take the responsibility and therefore take the opportunity of leading on this, they could fix this. They could be out ahead of the story. Instead, we're talking about processology. Keir's been in quickly and slickly, in and out of a reshuffle, and we come back to the travails of the cabinet.
Yeah, I think the only criticism you're hearing today of Keir Starmer about this reshuffle is everyone's saying it's very efficient. I don't think that there's too many moves that are very divisive. You do have a couple of Labour MPs saying, on a day when things are going so badly for the Tories, should we really be doing the reshuffle, or should we not let them own it? I think Gillian Keegan's comments might mean the Tories still get plenty of press coverage when it comes to who wins in the column inches tomorrow.
We look forward to reading those in the papers. Thank you, Katy. Thank you, John. And thank you for watching Spectator TV.